The piercing wail of the base alarm system cut through the pre-dawn darkness like a knife, jolting Captain Sarah Chen from her restless sleep in the pilot quarters. Red emergency lights bathed the corridors in an ominous glow as she threw on her flight suit and sprinted toward the Tactical Operations Center. The sound of her boots echoing against concrete walls was drowned out by the thunderous roar of jets scrambling overhead, whatever was happening. It was big. She burst through the heavy steel doors of the war room to find absolute chaos. Officers shouted over crackling radio transmissions, while massive wall-mounted screens displayed satellite feeds and tactical maps. The air reeked of coffee, sweat, and fear. At the center of it all stood General Morrison, his weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of the main display screen, barking orders into his headset with the intensity of a man watching his carefully laid plans crumble in real time. "Firebase Alpha, this is command. What's your status?" Morrison's voice carried the weight of 25 years of military command. But Chen could hear the underlying tension that came with having soldiers, lives hanging in the balance. The response crackled through the speakers, distorted by static and punctuated by the distant rumble of artillery. "Command, this is Alpha Actual. We're taking heavy indirect fire. Enemy armor spotted 15 clicks out and closing fast. We count at least 30 vehicles, main battle tanks, APCs, and mobile artillery. Our anti-tank systems took a direct hit 20 minutes ago. We're sitting ducks here." Chen pushed through the crowd of officers and intelligence analysts, her eyes immediately drawn to the main tactical display. The satellite feed showed Firebase Alpha, a small outpost, nestled in a strategic mountain pass that controlled the only viable route through the region. 200 American soldiers were dug in behind hastily constructed barriers, their position marked by a small blue icon that seemed impossibly fragile against the red tide of enemy forces advancing toward them. "Sir, what about air support?" called out Major Rodriguez from the communications station, his fingers dancing across multiple keyboards as he coordinated with various units across the theater. Morrison's jaw tightened visibly. "Negative. The 332nd Fighter Squadron is engaged with enemy aircraft 200 miles north. The 5th Nth Attack Squadron lost 3 birds yesterday, and their remaining pilots are grounded for mandatory rest. We've got nothing in the air that can reach Alpha in time." Chen studied the tactical situation with the analytical mind that had made her one of the best transport pilots in the Air Force. The enemy convoy was moving through a narrow mountain valley, perfect terrain for an A-10 attack run. The Warthog's low-speed maneuverability and devastating 30mm cannon were specifically designed for exactly this type of target-rich environment. Her pulse quickened as she realized there might be a solution everyone else was missing. "Time to impact?" she asked, stepping closer to the display. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, the base operations officer, glanced at his watch with grim precision. "Based on current enemy movement, they'll be in firing range of Firebase Alpha in 97 minutes. Our boys have good defensive positions, but without anti-tank capabilities." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the room understood the mathematics of modern warfare. Infantry versus armor was a losing proposition. Chen took a deep breath, knowing her next words would either save lives or end her career. "Sir, I can take the A-10. The room fell silent as if someone had suddenly sucked all the oxygen from the air. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, keyboards went quiet, and even the constant chatter from the radio seemed to pause. Every eye in the room turned toward her, and she could feel the weight of their collective stare. General Morrison slowly turned from the display screen, his steel-gray eyes fixing on her with the intensity of a predator sizing up potential prey. For a moment, his expression was unreadable. Then his face broke into a broad, condescending smile that made Chen's stomach clench with humiliation. "You?" Morrison's laugh started as a low chuckle, but quickly built into a full-throated roar that echoed off the concrete walls. "Captain Chen, you fly cargo planes. Big, slow, defenseless cargo planes. This isn't a supply run to some peaceful airstrip. This is real combat against an enemy that shoots back." The other officers began to snicker, their nervous energy finding release in shared mockery. Chen felt heat rising in her cheeks, but forced herself to maintain military bearing. She'd faced this kind of dismissal before, the assumption that because she flew transport missions, she somehow lacked the skills or courage for combat operations. "With respect, sir," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "I'm qualified on the A-10 platform. I completed the full training program at Davis-Monthan before being assigned to transport duty." Morrison's laughter died abruptly, replaced by a sneer that made his contempt crystal clear. "Qualified? Captain, there's a difference between flying a simulator and facing real enemy fire. Combat requires instincts you develop over years of actual fighting, not pushing papers and hauling supplies around safe airspace." Major Rodriguez leaned back in his chair, shaking his head with amusement. "General's right, Chen. Leave the hero stuff to the real fighter jocks. This isn't some training exercise where you get to restart if you mess up." Chen's hands clenched into fists at her sides, but she maintained her composure. "Sir, I've logged over 200 hours in A-10 simulators, including advanced combat scenarios. My weapon system scores were in the top 5% of my class. I know that aircraft inside and out. Simulators." Morrison's voice dripped with disdain. "Captain, simulators don't shoot back. Simulators don't have surface-to-air missiles trying to blow you out of the sky. Real combat is about split-second decisions under pressure that would make most people wet themselves." The general stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper that somehow carried more threat than his earlier shouting. "You want to know what real combat is like? It's watching your wingman get shot down and having to keep flying your mission while his screams fill your headset. It's making attack runs through flak so thick you can walk on it, knowing that one lucky shot will turn you into a fireball. It's coming home with holes in your aircraft and blood on your hands, wondering if the people you killed had families." Chen met his gaze without flinching. "Sir, Firebase Alpha has families too. 200 soldiers who are counting on us to find a solution." Morrison's expression hardened further. "Don't lecture me about soldiers' lives, Captain. I've been making life-and-death decisions since before you were born. The last thing those boys need is some wannabe hero getting herself killed in the first 30 seconds of combat." The tactical display updated with new intelligence, showing the enemy convoy had increased its speed. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, updated ETA is now 73 minutes. If we're going to do something..." Chen seized the moment, stepping forward and pulling up her personnel file on one of the auxiliary screens. "Sir, my A-10 training scores: 98% on weapon systems, 96% on tactical maneuvering, 100% on emergency procedures. I may fly transports now, but I earned my wings the same way every other pilot in this room did." The room fell silent again as the officers studied her scores. Even Morrison's expression shifted slightly, though his hostility remained evident. "Scores on paper," he muttered, but some of the certainty had left his voice. "Sir," Chen pressed, "that A-10 on the flight line is our only available asset. You can either let me try to save those soldiers, or you can explain to their families why you chose pride over their lives." Morrison stared at her for a long moment, his jaw working as he weighed his options. Finally, he threw up his hands in disgust. "Fine, go get yourself killed. At least then we'll have one less transport pilot cluttering up the roster." Chen didn't wait for the general to change his mind. She spun on her heel and bolted from the war room, her heart hammering against her ribs as Morrison's dismissive laughter echoed behind her. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly as she sprinted toward the flight line, emergency lighting casting dancing shadows on the walls, while the base alarm continued its relentless wail. Every second counted now. Firebase Alpha was running out of time, and she was their only hope. The heavy steel door to the outside slammed open as she burst onto the tarmac, immediately hit by the acrid smell of jet fuel and the thunderous roar of aircraft engines. The pre-dawn air was thick with humidity and tension, punctuated by the distant rumble of artillery that seemed to be growing closer. Ground crews scrambled across the flight line like ants, preparing aircraft for missions that might never come. Their faces grim with the knowledge that American soldiers were dying while they worked. There, sitting alone on the far end of the tarmac like a forgotten warrior, was the A-10 Thunderbolt II. Even in the dim emergency lighting, the aircraft looked exactly like what it was, a flying tank built around the most devastating cannon ever mounted on an airplane. Its twin engines sat high on the fuselage, designed to keep running even after taking massive battle damage. The titanium bathtub that protected the pilot could withstand direct hits from anti-aircraft fire. This wasn't a sleek fighter jet built for speed and grace. This was an ugly, brutal instrument of war designed for one purpose: destroying enemy armor. Captain Chen. The voice belonged to Technical Sergeant Martinez, the senior ground crew chief, who came jogging toward her with a clipboard in one hand and a look of confusion on his weathered face. "Ma'am, what are you doing out here?" "Colonel Patterson isn't scheduled to fly until 0800. Change of plans, Sergeant," Chen called back, already conducting her external inspection of the aircraft. "I'm taking her up." "How's her status?" Martinez's expression shifted from confusion to concern as he caught up with her. "Captain, with all due respect, this bird hasn't seen combat in 3 months. We've been using her for training flights and maintenance checks. Half the avionics systems are showing intermittent faults, and the GAU-8 cannon hasn't been test-fired in 2 weeks." Chen ran her hands along the aircraft's armored skin, checking for any obvious damage or loose panels. The A-10 felt solid under her touch, like a sleeping predator waiting to be awakened. "What about weapons load?" "That's another problem, ma'am." Martinez flipped through his clipboard, his voice taking on the careful tone of a man delivering bad news. "We've got a full load of 30mm ammunition for the cannon, 1,174 rounds of mixed high-explosive and armor-piercing. But we're light on missiles. Only 4 at GM-65 Mavericks mounted, and 2 of those are training rounds that got mixed in with the live ordnance." The radio on Martinez's belt crackled to life with an urgent transmission. All stations, this is Firebase Alpha. We are taking heavy artillery fire. Casualties mounting. Enemy armor now visible on the horizon. Request immediate air support. Repeat, we need air support now." Chen's blood ran cold as she heard the desperation in the voice. These weren't just statistics on a tactical display. These were real soldiers, probably not much older than herself, watching death approach across the valley floor. She thought about their families back home, waiting for phone calls that might never come. "Sergeant, I need this aircraft ready to fly in 10 minutes, she said, her voice carrying a new edge of authority. "I don't care if the systems are perfect. I just need them functional." Martinez studied her face for a moment, seeing something there that made him nod slowly. "Yes, ma'am." "Captain, if you don't mind me asking, where are the real fighter pilots? This seems like their kind of party." "They're all deployed or grounded," Chen replied, beginning her pre-flight inspection with methodical precision. "It's just me." "Just you?" Martinez's voice cracked slightly. "Ma'am, no disrespect, but you fly cargo planes. This is an attack aircraft. The enemy shoots back at these things. Chen paused in her inspection, meeting the sergeant's worried gaze. "Sergeant, I've been flying A-10s in simulators for 2 years. I know every system, every procedure, every emergency checklist. The only difference between this and a transport mission is the cargo I'm delivering." "What cargo is that, ma'am?" "Death," Chen replied simply, then continued her inspection. Martinez shook his head but began coordinating with his ground crew. "You heard the captain. Let's get this bird ready to fly. Check the hydraulics, top off the fuel, and make sure those Mavericks are properly seated." As the ground crew swarmed over the aircraft, Chen climbed into the cockpit and began her internal checks. The A-10's interior was cramped and utilitarian, every surface covered with switches, gauges, and displays. Unlike the spacious cockpit of her usual C-130 transport, this felt like sitting inside a weapon. The massive control stick dominated the center console, surrounded by weapons controls and targeting, systems that could deliver precise destruction at the pilot's command. She powered up the aircraft systems, watching as displays came online one by one. Several warning lights illuminated on the caution panel, minor faults that would normally ground the aircraft for maintenance. Under normal circumstances, she would never consider flying with these issues. But these weren't normal circumstances. "Captain." Martinez's voice called from below. "We've got a problem with the targeting computer. It's showing intermittent failures. The backup system works, but you'll have to manually designate targets. Can I still fire the cannon?" Chen called back. "Yes, ma'am. The GAU-8 has its own independent fire control system, but the Mavericks might be problematic." Chen's radio crackled with another transmission from Firebase Alpha. "Command, this is Alpha Actual. Enemy tanks are now 3 kilometers out and closing. We can see their muzzle flashes. Whatever you're going to send us, send it now." Her hands moved across the controls with practiced efficiency, starting the twin turbofan engines. The A-10 shuddered to life around her, the deep rumble of the engines vibrating through the airframe. This was it. No more time for doubts or second-guessing. 200 American soldiers were about to be overrun, and she was their only hope. "Tower. This is Warthog 1 requesting immediate takeoff clearance," she transmitted, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "Warthog 1, Tower. You are cleared for immediate takeoff. Runway 27. Good hunting, Captain." Chen released the brakes and pushed the throttles forward, feeling the aircraft accelerate down the runway. The A-10 was never going to win any speed contests, since it was built for low altitude. Close air support? Not racing through the sky. But as the wheels left the ground and she climbed into the storm-darkened sky, she felt a surge of confidence. This aircraft was designed for exactly the mission she was about to undertake, banking toward the mountains. She could see flashes of light on the horizon, the artillery barrage that was pounding. Firebase Alpha. The enemy convoy was out there somewhere in those valleys, racing toward their objective with the confidence of predators closing in for the kill. They had no idea that death was coming for them. On twin turbofan engines, carrying a 30mm cannon and a transport pilot with something to prove. Firebase Alpha. "This is Warthog 1, she transmitted as she climbed toward the mountains. "Air support is en route. Hold your positions. Help is coming." The response came back immediately, filled with desperate hope. "Warthog 1, Alpha Actual. Thank God, we're down to small arms and prayer. Whatever you can do it fast." Chen pushed the throttles to maximum power, the A-10 clawing its way toward the combat zone. Behind her, the base grew smaller, but ahead lay the most important mission of her life. The A-10 Thunderbolt II carved through the pre-dawn darkness like a mechanical bird of prey, its twin engines howling as Chen pushed the aircraft to its maximum cruise speed of 420 miles per hour. Below her, The landscape transformed from the flat desert surrounding the airbase into increasingly rugged terrain, rolling hills that gradually gave way to jagged mountain peaks shrouded in morning mist. The GPS display showed 23 minutes to target, but Firebase Alpha's increasingly desperate radio transmission suggested they might not have that long. Warthog 1. This is Alpha Actual, the voice crackled through her headset, barely audible over the sound of explosions in the background. Enemy armor is now 2 kilometers out. We can hear their engines. Our perimeter is taking heavy mortar fire. We've got wounded who need immediate evacuation, but we can't even get to them. Chun's jaw tightened as she listened to the fear and desperation in the ground commander's voice. These weren't seasoned veterans speaking in calm, professional tones. These were young soldiers watching death approach across the valley floor, knowing they were outgunned and outnumbered. She thought about their families back home, probably sleeping peacefully, unaware that their sons and daughters were fighting for their lives in a remote mountain pass halfway around the world. Alpha Actual. Warthog 1. I'm 15 minutes out. Can you give me a tactical update on enemy positions? Warthog 1. We count approximately 30 vehicles in the main convoy to 72 main battle tanks, BMP infantry fighting vehicles, and what looks like mobile artillery. They're moving through the Kharkov Valley, single file due to the narrow terrain. No air cover visible, but we're detecting multiple radar signatures that suggest mobile SAM sites. Chun studied her tactical display, overlaying the enemy positions with the terrain map. The Kharkov Valley was a natural choke point, a narrow gorge carved between 2 mountain ridges that provided the only viable route for heavy vehicles through this part of the range. It was perfect terrain for an ambush, but it also meant she'd be flying into a confined space with limited maneuvering room and multiple threats. The mountains loomed ahead now, their peaks disappearing into low-hanging clouds that would provide some concealment, but also limit visibility. Chun dropped to 500 feet above ground level, using the terrain to mask her approach from enemy radar. The A-10's radar warning receiver remained silent so far. She was undetected. Warthog 1. Alpha Actual. Enemy lead elements are now 1 kilometer out. We can see individual tank commanders in their cupolas. They're moving fast, estimate 25 miles per hour through the valley. Chun's mind raced through the tactical calculations. At that speed, the enemy would reach Firebase Alpha in less than 3 minutes. She was still 12 minutes out, flying as fast as the A-10's engines could push her. The mathematics were brutal and unforgiving. She wasn't going to make it in time to prevent the initial assault. Alpha Actual, I need you to hold for 10 more minutes. Use everything you have: small arms, grenades, anything that can slow them down. Warthog 1 will do our best, but we're down to our last magazines. Most of our heavy weapons were destroyed in the artillery barrage. Chun pushed the throttles past their recommended limits, feeling the engine strain as she coaxed every possible ounce of speed from the aircraft. The A-10 wasn't built for speed. It was built for survivability and firepower, but she needed both right now. The airframe shuddered slightly as she exceeded normal operating parameters, but the tough aircraft held together. Ahead, the entrance to Kharkov Valley appeared as a dark slash between 2 towering ridges. Chun could see smoke rising from the far end. Firebase Alpha was already under attack. Her targeting computer flickered to life as she approached the valley mouth, but immediately began showing error messages. The intermittent faults Martinez had warned her about were getting worse under the stress of combat operations. "Damn it," she muttered, switching to backup systems. The secondary targeting computer came online, but it was slower and less precise than the primary system. She'd have to rely more on visual identification and manual targeting, exactly what she didn't need when facing 30 armored vehicles in a confined space. The radio erupted with panic transmissions. "Alpha Actual to all stations. Tanks are breaching our outer perimeter. We need that air support now. Chen banked hard left and dove into the valley, immediately dropping to 200 feet above the rocky floor. The walls of the gorge rose on either side like the jaws of some massive stone beast, creating a natural tunnel that amplified the sound of her engines. She was committed now. There was no turning back, and then she saw them. The enemy convoy stretched through the valley like a steel serpent. 30 vehicles moving in single file through the narrow passage. T-72 main battle tanks led the formation, their 125mm guns traversing toward Firebase Alpha. Behind them came BMP, infantry fighting vehicles packed with assault troops, followed by mobile artillery pieces and supply trucks. It was a perfectly organized combined arms assault, designed to overwhelm the small American outposts through sheer firepower and numbers. Chen's breath caught in her throat as she realized the true scope of what she was facing. This wasn't just a convoy. This was an entire mechanized battalion, complete with air defense systems. She could see the distinctive silhouettes of SA-8 mobile surface-to-air missile launchers interspersed throughout the formation, their radar dishes rotating as they searched for aerial threats. Her radar warning receiver suddenly exploded into life, filling her headset with urgent beeping as multiple enemy radars locked onto her aircraft. Red warning lights illuminated across her instrument panel as the threat detection system identified at least 6 different SAM sites tracking her approach. Missile lock. Missile lock. Missile lock, the automated warning system announced in its maddeningly calm computer voice, as if discussing the weather rather than imminent death. Chen's training took over, her hands moving across the controls with practiced precision. She threw the A-10 into a violent right turn, pulling nearly 6 Gs as she dove toward the valley floor. Chaff and flares erupted from dispensers mounted on the aircraft's wings, creating a cloud of metallic strips and burning magnesium designed to confuse incoming missiles. The first SAM streaked past her canopy, missing by less than 50 feet. The second missile detonated in the chaff cloud, its proximity fuse triggered by the metallic decoys. Shrapnel peppered the A-10's armored skin, but the titanium bathtub protecting the cockpit held firm. Warthog 1, this is Alpha Actual. The voice was barely audible over the sound of gunfire and explosions. We can see you in the valley. The lead tanks are firing on our positions. Chen pulled out of her evasive dive, leveling off at 150 feet above the convoy. She was now flying directly over the enemy formation, close enough to see individual soldiers manning machine guns on the vehicle turrets. Tracer fire began rising toward her aircraft like deadly fireworks. Green and red streams of bullets, creating a lethal light show in the narrow valley. The convoy commander's voice crackled over the intercepted enemy radio frequency. Unknown aircraft in the valley. All air defense units, weapons free. Bring it down. Suddenly, every anti-aircraft gun in the convoy opened fire simultaneously. The valley erupted in a storm of tracer fire as 23mm and 30mm cannons sent streams of high explosive shells toward her aircraft. The A-10 shuddered as several rounds found their mark, punching holes in the wings and fuselage. But the rugged aircraft continued flying. Chen's finger hovered over the trigger for the GAU-8 cannon, her targeting reticle centered on the lead T-72 tank. This was it, the moment of truth. Everything came down to the next few seconds. Firebase Alpha, this is Warthog 1, she transmitted, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around her. I'm beginning my attack run. Keep your heads down. The A-10's nose dipped slightly as she lined up her shot, the massive 30mm cannon preparing to unleash hell on the enemy below. Chen's finger squeezed the trigger, and the GAU-8 Avenger cannon erupted with its signature brrr, a sound like the world's largest chainsaw tearing through steel. The entire A-10 shuddered as the 7-barrel rotary cannon spat out 70 rounds per second of 30 mm depleted uranium ammunition. Each projectile, capable of punching through the thickest tank armor ever manufactured, got the lead T-72 tank simply disintegrated. One moment, it was a 60-ton war machine rolling confidently toward Firebase Alpha, and the next, it was a burning hulk of twisted metal scattered across the valley floor. The depleted uranium rounds had torn through the tank's frontal armor like tissue paper, detonating the ammunition stored inside and creating a fireball that rose 200 feet into the air. Jesus Christ! The voice of Firebase Alpha's commander exploded over the radio, a mixture of awe and relief. Warthog 1, that was beautiful. The lead tank is completely destroyed. But Chen had no time to celebrate. The convoy erupted into chaos as vehicle commanders realized they were under attack from above. Tank turrets swiveled skyward, machine guns chattered to life, and the mobile SAM sites began launching missiles with desperate intensity. The narrow valley became a shooting gallery, and she was the primary target. She banked hard left, pulling the A-10 into a knife-edge turn that scraped the aircraft's wingtip, dangerously close to the rocky valley wall. G-forces pressed her deep into her ejection seat as she maneuvered through the confined space, using every trick she'd learned flying transport aircraft through difficult terrain. The enemy had expected a high-altitude bombing run or missile attack. They weren't prepared for an aircraft willing to fight at treetop level in a space barely wide enough for safe flight. All units. All units. The enemy convoy commander's voice crackled over the intercepted radio frequency, his previous confidence replaced by panic. We have an A-10 Warthog in the valley. Repeat, American ground attack aircraft is making gun runs. All air defense units concentrate fire. Chen rolled inverted and dove toward the convoy again, her targeting computer struggling to maintain lock through the electronic interference and battle damage. The backup system was slower than she needed, forcing her to rely on visual targeting and instinct. She lined up on a cluster of BMP infantry fighting vehicles, their thin armor no match for her cannon. The GIU-8 roared again, sending another burst of depleted uranium death into the enemy formation. 3 BMPs exploded simultaneously, their fuel tanks rupturing and sending burning diesel cascading across the valley floor. Infantry soldiers who had been riding on the vehicle's exterior scrambled for cover among the rocks. Their assault on Firebase Alpha forgotten in the face of aerial annihilation. Warthog 1, this is Alpha Actual. The ground commander's voice was filled with desperate hope. The enemy advance has stopped. They're taking cover and returning fire at you instead of us. Chen pulled up sharply, climbing toward the valley rim as a SAM missile streaked past her canopy. The proximity of the rocky walls was both her salvation and her curse. The enemy missiles couldn't maneuver effectively in the confined space, but neither could she. Every turn had to be calculated perfectly to avoid slamming into the mountainside. Her aircraft shuddered as 23mm cannon shells punched through the left wing. But the A-10's legendary durability kept her airborne. Hydraulic fluid began streaming from damaged lines, and several warning lights illuminated on her caution panel. The aircraft was taking punishment, but it was designed to absorb incredible amounts of battle damage and keep fighting. Enemy convoy commander. To all units, the intercepted radio transmission revealed the growing desperation in the enemy ranks. We cannot advance while that aircraft is operational. All vehicles with anti-aircraft capability concentrate fire. Bring it down at all costs. Chen rolled into another attack run, this time targeting the mobile artillery pieces that had been pounding Firebase Alpha. These were the weapons that had caused the most casualties among the American defenders, and eliminating them was her top priority. She dove toward a self-propelled howitzer, its crew frantically trying to depress the main gun low enough to engage her aircraft. The GA-U-8 cannon spoke again, its depleted uranium rounds tearing through the artillery piece's thin armor and detonating the high explosive shells stored inside. The explosion was so violent, it shattered windows in vehicles 50 meters away, and the shockwave nearly knocked Chun's aircraft out of control. Secondary explosions! Firebase Alpha's commander shouted over the radio. Warthog 1, you just took out their artillery. The bombardment has stopped. But the enemy wasn't finished. As Chun climbed away from her latest kill, A-10 mobile SAM launcher fired a salvo of 4 missiles simultaneously. The valley filled with white smoke trails as the heat-seeking weapons streaked toward her aircraft. Their proximity fuses armed and ready to detonate, Chun's hands flew across the controls, dispensing chaff and flares while throwing the A-10 into a series of violent evasive maneuvers. The first missile detonated in a flare, its infrared seeker confused by the burning magnesium. The second missile missed entirely, slamming into the valley wall in a shower of rock and flame. But the third missile found its mark. The warhead detonated 20 feet from her aircraft's tail, sending shrapnel through the rear fuselage and severing hydraulic lines. The A-10 lurched violently to the right as the flight controls became sluggish and unresponsive. Warning alarms filled the cockpit as multiple systems failed simultaneously. Warthog 1, are you hit? Firebase Alpha's commander called urgently. We saw the explosion. I'm still flying, Chun replied through gritted teeth, fighting to maintain control of the damaged aircraft. But I'm running low on ammunition and the aircraft is badly damaged. She looked down at the convoy and felt a surge of satisfaction. What had been an organized military formation was now a scattered collection of burning vehicles and panicked soldiers. At least 15 vehicles were completely destroyed, their crews either dead or fleeing on foot. The survivors were taking cover behind rocks and disabled vehicles, no longer advancing toward Firebase Alpha. But the job wasn't finished. Several tanks were still operational, and the mobile SAM sites continued to pose a threat. Chun made a decision that would have horrified her instructors, but felt absolutely right in the moment. She was going to make one final attack run, using her remaining ammunition to finish the job. Alpha Actual, I'm making one more pass. After this, I'll be Winchester out of ammunition. Warthog 1, you've already saved our lives. Don't risk yourself for negative Alpha. I'm finishing this. Chun rolled into her final attack run, diving toward the largest concentration of surviving vehicles. Her ammunition counter showed less than 200 rounds remaining, enough for one sustained burst from the GA-U-8. She had to make it count. The enemy threw everything they had at her. Tracer fire filled the air like a deadly light show, and 2 more SAMs streaked toward her aircraft. But Chun was beyond fear now, beyond doubt. She was a weapon of precision and destruction. And these enemy soldiers had made the mistake of threatening American lives. The GA-U-8 cannon fired its final burst, the last of her depleted uranium ammunition, tearing through a T-72 tank and 2 remaining BMPs. The explosions lit up the valley like daylight. And when the smoke cleared, the enemy convoy was finished. 30 vehicles reduced to burning scrap metal scattered across 3 miles of mountain valley. Chun pulled up sharply, climbing away from the carnage as her damaged aircraft struggled to maintain altitude. Behind her, the valley floor was a graveyard of twisted steel and flame. The threat to Firebase Alpha was over. Warthog 1, this is Alpha Actual. The ground commander's voice was thick with emotion. I don't know how to thank you. You just saved 200 American lives. Chun smiled grimly as she turned toward home, her battle-scarred A-10 limping through the sky. Just doing my job, Alpha. Just doing my job.